welcome back to the Fantasy Rugby Draft podcast. Thanks for downloading and listening. I'm Bruce Wilkinson, and joining me in the booth is the man primarily made of moss, Nathan Mossman. How are you, sir?
Terrible.
Terrible? Explain.
No, I'm not. It's just that we always have the same opening. I thought I'd say something different this time.
That's true. So it's not a reflection on your teams this weekend? They win okay?
No, not at all. 6-0 at the moment, so can't complain.
Wow, that's not too bad. I haven't checked in the last 5 minutes, but have the Hurricanes scored again? I assume they might have. Goodness gracious. I find it quite amusing how everybody's, there's this whole movement of trying to cull teams in Sanzar, and all of a sudden the Rebels are in the crosshairs. I think they've forgotten how bad the Force have been for the last how many years, and it's just because they're having a good season. It might be quite timely. Yeah,
well, I suppose at some point it'll be the Blues under the crosshair, will it?
Exactly.
when they get 70 put on them.
Yeah, indeed. It'll be interesting next week. So today we're going to review Super Rugby Gameweek 2 for Fantasy Rugby Draft. We'll also announce the Refer a Friend winner. We did announce it on the Friday Facebook Live session, but we do have a different bunch of listeners, so they're probably hearing that for the first time.
Is this the one that Emma Stone won?
La La Land.
Yeah, that's right.
Goodness gracious, that was some good work. Warren Beatty, take your heart out. He just threw it under the bus, didn't he?
Oh, completely. Awesome. Yeah, he was looking at it thinking, this is wrong, I'm not going to say it.
That's hosting 101, love it. A reminder to those who haven't clocked it yet around the the Fantasy Rugby Draft playoff fixtures. Check online for those. I keep on banging on about it. We are going to have some frustrated managers when they get to game week 16 and realise their world's turned upside down. There's a lot of buys and there's a lot of teams that aren't playing there. So just check that out. And actually, if you're the commissioner of the league as well, make sure that your league know about that. Try and be that bigger person and make sure everyone's aware that there's a whole bunch of teams that aren't playing in that game week 16. Right, let's just pounce straight into it. There's a lot to get through, mate. Force Reds, what did you make of that? Ito Nabuli?
Yeah, the one game of the year, right? So
yeah,
I think people probably would have been, maybe seen the score and then scrambled to see if they happened to get Nabuli'd on this particular weekend. And there would have been a lot of people who, and I know in some leagues that didn't start him, and you can understand it, to be fair.
Well, that's right. I mean, he was on our no-fly list up until that point. And for those that were listening last season will know what the no-fly list, we mentioned on the Facebook Live session again, but players that kind of, they lure you in, they've got the physical goods, they look like they could just blow up any one week, and they invariably suck you in and you start them, and then they have 3 or 4 weeks of just dead results. So we put him on the no-fly list, and the rule is we don't start him until he actually puts up a performance. So he put up a performance, he's going off the no-fly list, but very, very easily could Nabuli go straight back on that list, as you alluded to.
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at it, I don't think it was, say, a standout performance in the same way that, in the same game, that Chance Penny, I think, was.
Yep.
I mean, it was a tale of two wingers, but I felt like he was more of the story. Like, he just looked electric every time he got the ball. Just there was a lot of potential there, and perhaps with Nabuli, it was more him being on the end of things. I mean,
100% agree.
He showed a little bit more speed, I think, than we've given him credit for at times. But
I thought that too. He ran away from a couple of people, and I was expecting him to be mowed down. Maybe I've just got shades of no Yaravaru in my head with him, but he showed a clean pair of heels there.
Yeah, that's right. So I think he's probably the big takeaway from this. To be fair, there wasn't a lot else on the Force side from a fantasy point of view, anyway, that really stood out to me.
No, that's right.
I guess the other takeaway will be Jono Lance went off at half-time. Ian Pryor came on, took some shots at goal. So he is a potentially interesting pickup heading into next week. But, yeah.
I heard about that. I've been looking, catching up. I've got trying to dig in a little bit of comments of what Vessels has been saying around Jono Lance because he's got a decent matchup next week. So I thought It looks like it's a rib injury, and it looks like it's not too serious. It seems to suggest that he probably will play this week, but again, one to monitor on Monday and Tuesday when you're looking through the reviews to see if there's any more information about Lance. But yeah, you're right. Ian Pryor's a decent pickup if he comes into that team because he kicks goals and he's a halfback. I thought I had Chance Penny circled as well. I thought he was the talking point of the game, and I mean, how often do we actually see a Force backline that looks like it's got some penetration to it? You know, with Curtis Rona, Chance Penny, and Jono Lance running the cutter, and with Dane Haylett-Petty running a fullback, they look pretty good. All of a sudden, Luke Morahan's an afterthought.
Yeah, that's right.
One other player I wanted to quickly kind of mention, because he's a bit of a buzz from last season, from NRC actually, more respects. Rugby Ridge talked about it, is Isaiah Parise. He came off the bench for the last kind of 10 or so minutes, and he scored 10 points. I don't know what the status of Kurandrani is or where it sits, but I think from what I interpreted from the tea leaves of what Ridge was saying, it is only a matter of time before Parisi gets that starting spot, and he's a midfielder who lists on the wing. So I have rolled the dice in a couple of my leagues, and I'm holding on to him. And he's on a very short leash. If it's not this or next week, then it's probably off. But just one to keep an eye on. Any more from the Force Reds apart from, I don't know, I guess the whole Reds thing, right? Everyone talks about this as being their season. Is this just a good performance from the Force playing at home for the first time?
No, I think there could be an element here of the Reds being overrated. They look really disjointed. There's not to say that can't change, but they look disjointed in even little things like Stephen Moore trying to get the ball on the back of the maul and dropping it, or they're sort of not being on the same page with those moves. I think from what I saw, possibly better days ahead for the Reds front row. And the only thing other than that was that Nick Frisbee was terrible.
Yeah, he absolutely was, wasn't he? Not just from fantasy, but he just, laboured, didn't give Cooper a hell of a lot of time. It just didn't look good.
Yeah, knocked on at the base, kicked out on the full. You name it. He was just
a good all-round performance.
He was going for the full house. Yeah, he called bad rugby bingo at the end of that one.
Chiefs Blues. I'll let you have the microphone for a wee bit. This is a pretty good performance from the Chiefs.
Do you know what my favourite part about the whole of this was? And it's people that don't get New Zealand TV coverage wouldn't have seen it, but they had the guys in the studio had Damien McKenzie and James Lowe on camera, interviewing them through the headsets, and Tamati Ellison was there, and he said the morale must be great in the team. And James Lowe just started laughing at him and says, the morale is fine. Yeah, it's good. Like, just mocked him. It was actually pretty good. I mean, what can you say? I think this is,
how much of it down to the red card, or how much do you think the Chiefs just played well? Well, this was coming either way.
It looked very Chiefs-esque in terms of the rugby that was played.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean. The quick transfers, just some of the confidence with ball in hand, prepared to chance the arm, that sort of thing. And I don't know, it didn't take me by surprise. And
not at all.
Yeah. So I guess because we haven't done one of these so far since the season started, Cruden kicking. So, immediately we're talking about somebody that's, in the upper echelons of the fantasy players and across the entire game.
Yeah, that's right.
And the other, sorry, you were going to say.
I was just going to say he is going to be one of the more valuable picks now. If you got him somewhere around the 4th or 5th round and did that kind of waiting on fly half theory, then and you picked up him, well done. You could be on the way to a championship.
And Kurbalo, I think the minutes that he's getting now, he sort of only played 60 this week, but the impression I got was that was partly because they were so far ahead they decided to rest him. He played 79 minutes the week before, so he's in that position where he's not being challenged for that minimum of 60 minutes, and all of a sudden, he's in the frame now as a top halfback because of that.
Yeah, that's right. There's a lot of focus on Pulu, wasn't there, coming back, and he was niggly, and there was a lot of little dust-ups involving him, but Kurbalo just went about his business and doing, as you said at the top, doing a lot of little flick passes, a lot of the Chiefs way, and very, very impressive. I think, again, folks that managed to pick him up after they heard about the Brad Weber injury is probably going to go fairly well this season, or at least it's a position you don't have to worry about, and that's nice. It's nice to have in fantasy rugby draft where you can just plug someone in. You don't really need a backup and just let it go. I thought the whole game was kind of highlighted on that slap inside ball that Cruden gave. Was it James?
It was.
No, Anton Leonard-Brown.
It was James Lowe.
One or t'other.
No, it was James Lowe. Yeah.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah.
That was great.
No, it was good. Yeah.
And looking at the Blues side of things, I guess one bright spot for them, and they were good last week as well. I guess one easy matchup, one tough matchup. It was their front row. They're picking up some points.
Yeah, and I think they'll continue to do so. They're a front row that I drafted in two teams actually, because I sort of know what they're capable of, and I mean Charlie Van is he's you know, you hate to say it, but you know, for skills for a big man, all that kind of thing. But yeah, you know, he does some good things, and I think he'll be primarily, I guess, the source of points. But there'll be others that chip in, and I think they'll be absolutely fine going forward. They'll be up there and amongst the top 5. Yeah,
they do have quite a few defender beaten stats, and it is mainly around. He's got it's that kind of little hip swerve that he does, a little step. He just kind of shimmies to the left and the right. It doesn't take much to beat someone around the fringe there, and it's not like it's a clean break or anything. It's just a defender beaten, but they clock that up quite readily. Anything more from Chiefs Blues?
I don't think there was really, because I think we've picked out the main players. Rico back down to earth a little bit, and that's not entirely surprising. You know, he can only do so much. You know, when he gets the ball, and I thought Leonard Brown handled him pretty well.
Yeah, he did. I'll be interested to see what Uemanga does. So I thought Michael Collins again he wasn't the reason they lost, but they're just very, very quiet match for them. And when you've got someone like Malani Nanai there who can just spark that, and I don't know, it's a bit of a cliche, but the Blues is a very confidence team, and once they get that kind of first spark and everyone's happy and singing, then they dominate games. And I just think having that kind of almost calming 15 instead of having Malana Nanai who can just attack from anywhere, I think you're missing a trick there. A bit like putting Dag onto the wing, but we'll get to that. Hurricanes, Rebels. I'm not entirely sure where to start here. Well,
I'll give you my take on it.
Go on.
I didn't watch it. I had the opportunity to go back and watch it, obviously, and I didn't bother because I looked at the score and I just thought, well, we're not going to learn anything about the Canes here. We're not learning anything through the first 2 weeks. The players that we knew were good are good. The players that we thought might be good have been good. Does that mean they're going to be good moving forward? We don't know. Honestly, I don't think that you can take a whole lot away from this at the moment.
No.
Well, I kind of feel like we need to wait and see until they actually turn up against an actual rugby team.
And that's next week. So this is the point, right, is that the Blues just turned over the Rebels quite significantly in Melbourne. Hurricanes have just done the same thing, and the Chiefs just beat the Blues fairly handily. So circle gets the square. Chiefs Hurricanes should really kind of show us where both teams are at. And they're both playing well. I mean, there's no real kind of other way to take that, but they're both playing very, very well. I thought...
You're going to find somebody for the Rebels?
Well, no, Murphy was good. He was very, very good. Like he was one player that looked like he actually wanted to earn his paycheck. He looked like he was fairly happy with, carting the ball up in a fairly losing team, in a badly losing team, I should say. But I thought it might be actually a better tactic to kind of trade high for the Hurricanes. I'm not sure you're going to get better value for now. I don't think, obviously, you're probably not going to be trading Milner, Scudder or Barrett or anything. If you drafted them, you're probably going to stick with them where they are. But someone like Laumape or Aso, you got them fairly cheaply, I would expect. I think you might be able to get some value out of that. And I'll get on to a player that I was going to kind of target halfway through the Lions-Waratahs games until he scored a try at the end. But what do you do with Jordie Barrett? There's a few folks asking about him because he's quite a buzz player. He's not likely to get a hell of a lot of game time unless A, Milner Scudder goes down, or B, there's some resting in some All Blacks closer to the Lions games, which I actually think both of those combined is a half decent chance. Would you trade for Jordie Barrett? Would you give up anything for him, or will you just or the opposite? You would prefer not to have him because you don't think he's going to get much game time?
I mean, at the moment, he's somebody that if I have him and I do have him on one team, I'm just going to sit and wait. I would trade him away if I got a decent offer. I tried to trade him away for, say, one of the long-term injured players like Kumbrink. I mean, it didn't work out in the end, but that was kind of what I was thinking.
It's a good idea.
If you could trade on the buzz for somebody that actually isn't going to help the opposition, the person you're trying to trade with, and obviously you get something back for the future, and they get potentially something back for now.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. You need to look at those first 2 game weeks and also look at injuries, because that's quite a cunning one with Ruan Combrink, because there's a element of uncertainty, and you know, if someone drafted him that high, there's a chance he actually the team may not be in great shape. They might be 0-2, feeling a little bit nervous and feeling as though they have to pull that trigger, and Jordie Barrett could be a go, especially after seeing Hurricanes just obliterate 2 teams. You know, they've actually scored more points than minutes, I believe.
Yeah.
It's quite funny, it's quite good. So you mentioned it on a Facebook Live, and it couldn't be truer, is that the ass man, Proctor, everyone else around him scores points. Like, literally, everyone around him, from Perenara through to Milner-Skudder, and even Barrett to a certain extent. But Proctor didn't get a handful. He's there, and you can see him doing a lot of good things, but the minibus, I believe Laumape has been tagged, and Aso are just taking the headlines at the moment.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. He's almost like having some sort of magnetic effect, you know, where the points just won't quite gravitate towards him. No,
that's right, exactly. And to be fair, I'm not sure why Vince Aso didn't actually just take that ball down and score it himself in the corner. I don't know if you saw that cross kick, but yeah, either way, he was in the end goal. He could have just fallen over, but hey ho.
No, so yeah, I agree with you that I think that trading or selling high on some of those Hurricanes players right now would be a good thing. So, for instance, if I could get rid of Aso and get somebody who has underperformed so far, and that would be somebody like Mapu, I would do that.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. So I had, in the back of my mind, before Israel Folau scored that wonderful try, I had him in my sights. I was thinking if I could get rid of someone like an Aso or someone like Laumape and get Folau, because there's going to be a lot of nervous managers out there, and they might not have taken that in-depth look to see that, okay, Bernard Foley's not there, Simone's not gelling very well with Bryce Hegarty. Maybe they were a bit tetchy again if they're 0-2, but then he went and scored that try, and now he's got 21 points beside his name, and people are a little bit more relaxed. So probably not a great example of someone you can actually trade for now. But up to about the last minute, that was looking good. Have I got anything more to say about Hurricanes Rebels apart from Vola doing Vola things? Threw a great intercept for one of the tries. It's awesome. No, let's just move on. Let's go to Highlanders Crusaders. Did you catch this?
I did catch it, yeah.
So I guess the first thing to kind of discuss was a little bit of uncertainty around Mitchell Hunt and whether he was going to kick goals or not. So clearly he did. Kicked okay. That's not where he got most of his points from, though. He got most of his points because he was sitting at fullback a lot of the time on defence, playing that counter-attack kind of style as well. But Marty Mack looked good coming on, I should say, as Hunt was going off. But I think the Landers were pretty knackered by the end of that game. They had a lot of tackling to do in the first half. I think it kind of just came home. And when Crockett and Romano came on and the Crusaders figured out that they just needed to destroy the scrum and they could get a penalty every time, that they just kind of pushed that. I don't think it was Marty Mack versus Mitchell Hunt, but we did have a question. I asked folks on the Fantasy Rugby Draft Hall of Fame if they had any questions for the pod or issues that they wanted to touch on, and I was scared that this one was going to come up. What do you do with Mitchell Hunt and Marty McKenzie? Do you think, and we don't have anything to go on. Razor hasn't said anything. Leon McDonald hasn't said anything. There's nothing we can infer from the team sheet and from the review and from the post-match talk. Where do you think they'll go? Do you think Hunt did enough to stay in that 10 position? I
really don't know, and I'm not actually keen on speculating on coaches' decisions, and it's just not something that I think can really add a lot of value to.
No,
and the thing is that
that's fair. From
a fantasy point of view, it's in some ways it's not a massive issue because they're playing in different positions. Mm-hmm. And therefore you're not trying to pick and choose between them say as who's going to be your starting fly half.
No, I agree. I think folks are looking for that fly half. Maybe they've had a Foley injury or something else as well. That they want to get Marty Mack, and they just saw how the Crusaders went at the end, and 1 and 1 makes 2. He was the reason, but I'm not sure that is the reason. For me, looking at some of those tries that the Highlanders scored, it was clearly a situation where Razor had put players out of position, and it showed. On attack, it's fine. You can make it up as you go along. But on defence, if you don't have instinctive for where you are supposed to be in the positional strength, like that Naholo try was ridiculous, with Havili somewhere around and Mitchell Hunt both looking at each other like shrugging their shoulders, and Israel Dagg just shaking his head on the far right hand side. You see that try, that nudge over from Nugget, that kick? Naholo just went flying through. It was a break from I think it might have been from a scrum or a ruck or something like that, and it was almost first phase play, and Naholo just screamed onto it, and there was no fullback at home at all.
And this is the one where Seta turned really slowly and watched him run away, or was that a different one?
No, that was one as well. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So he seemed to be not particularly awake to the fact that was about to happen as well. So, and he's another guy, of course, who's playing out of position. Yeah,
exactly. And I think once Crockett and Romano came on, and once they started putting players in positions that they can do more damage, I just don't think Tamanavale's a left winger. I think he prefers playing out on the right. I know it sounds a bit silly because he plays 13 a lot, so it should be left and right, but he just seems so much more home on the right wing, and hopefully Razor learns from that, because they play the Reds next week, and that's pretty attractive. If the last 15 minutes Crusaders kind of turns up. It looked like it was exactly the same match as last year, didn't it? Where it was all Crusaders for the first 15, and then all of a sudden they're down by 20 points. It's like, how did that happen? Your boy Naholo, good?
Yeah, very good.
Very good. I worry about him a little bit just with injury. He seems to always pick up something. Did you see that right at the end there? Where he's on the sideline and he kind of waved... He waved the physio across, and then he kind of waved him off again.
Well, I saw him. He was down just before he scored that try, and then got up and ran 50 metres to score. So, I'm not too worried.
So Havili got a bit of a head knock, so it may force Razor to play Dagg back at 15 and Seta on the right. Hopefully, I think just provides a little bit more balance. Dagg obviously has a lot more of attacking and a much more of an influence on the game if he can play at 15. What's your thoughts on Ben Smith? Because as you said, we haven't had a podcast yet, so he's concussed. I suspect he'll be wrapped in cotton wool. Do you have a similar view? With the Lions tour coming up?
Well, he has to play at some point.
He will have to play at some point, but I don't think they'll be rushing him back. The Highlanders are 0-2 now, I guess, but I don't think that they'll be... He's royalty, I guess, and he's very pivotal to the All Blacks. He needs to be 100% right. And I know that sounds a bit silly because they always have to be 100% right to pass an HIA, but if I had Ben Smith in my team, I'd just be preparing for the fact that you may not see him this week. Tavita Lee and Fekitoa, I've got two names down here that didn't play particularly well. Fekitoa in particular. I don't know why they have him fronting the Lions ads on Sky. Did you see that?
Well, he won't be playing in that series.
That's right. Exactly.
No,
that's the point.
I've probably been banging his drum for a while, so excuse me if I've mentioned it before, but I just think he's a very average player. You name it, like it's just, decision making, hands, all the rest of it. How many games like this does he have to put up before people sort of start to realise?
Not going to get an argument here at all. I've never thought he's a player that you can build a backline around at 13. I think it's one of your more pivotal spots, and he's a little bit too erratic, shall we say. Another point to note on this game, it's not necessarily who actually played in this game, but Digby Ioane was playing for the Knights and Faddis was playing for the Bravehearts, so no injury there for those two. It seems a bit strange that Digby would be coming back from injury in the Knights. I'm not sure if it was someone like Richie Mwanga, whether they'd start him out in the Knights or not. It seems a bit of an odd one to me. Anything more you want to say from this game, but heartbreaking for the Highlanders, I guess, just from an overall?
Yeah, I think Faddis will be back.
I think so too. I think certainly looking at that, certainly looking at the team that just didn't seem to have... They scored some points, but it wasn't any penetration there for them that kind of, at the very end, I thought the Lima Sapawanga drop kick probably turned turned the point as well. All right, let's get on to Brumbies Sharks. Hauera went well for Ranui.
He went okay. I mean, he didn't let you down. He got 20 plus points, and I think in a week where fly halves generally were quite low scoring, I think that was probably good enough to get him into the top 5 perhaps.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to look up. A lot of his, again, he's not. A lot of his stats came from defenders beaten. He's got quite nifty feet. I thought it looked pretty good.
Yeah, that was kind of the big takeaway is from the week before, having looked kind of solid and organised and a good goal kicker, he showed something different this week. And I think that bodes quite well moving forward. So it definitely wasn't the high scoring or affair that I thought it might be, but I still thought that he did enough to show me that I think he's going to be an option, someone that you can use going forward.
Yeah, so number 8 this week, which is pretty good. Top 10, starting fly half, decent.
Mm-hmm.
And for someone that you didn't need to draft, he was well down in the draft list. I think we had him somewhere in the 80s, but I think his average draft division actually ended up a lot lower than that. It's not a hell of a lot of interest in this game, to be honest. It just seemed a bit. Obviously the try at the end was amazing, and how the coach for the Sharks watched the last 5 minutes of Sharks Reds and thought, yeah, I'll start Clement Prochino. That's a good idea. He was terrible in that Reds game when he came on. He showed like 3 passes and was completely out of line. He looked gassed after 5 minutes. Kerwin Bosch looked okay when he came on. I think he only might have even touched the ball that one time or maybe twice, but he looked pretty sharp. I hope that they kind of persist with him at 15 because Prochino is not the answer. The other player that I thought stood out in this game was Jean-Luc Dupree. He looks to have taken a step up from last year. He looks like he's a bit more comfortable after having last year under his belt. And he just, with him and Philip van der Walt playing pretty much left and right on the flank, they look really strong. He looks good. We wondered if last week was a little bit of a, just a bit of a smash and grab against the Reds, but he backed it up again this week. You see the same thing with Jean-Luc, or you're a little bit more reserved?
No, I think that's probably fair.
What about Lacunio Am, who evidently was playing open side flanker for the Sharks with those 3 turnovers? He was pretty good.
Yeah. I think he's somebody that we talked about a little bit in pre-season and said he had an opportunity, if he got a starting spot, which looks like he probably did a little bit earlier than what we were expecting, to be fair.
Yeah, he did. Any more from Brumbies Sharks?
Not particularly, really. It was...
Cobus Reinach looked a bit tired to me. He looked a bit unfit, and his pass was very laboured. Someone was defending him somewhere, I can't remember, saying that he's come back from a long-term injury, and that is true, but fitness is one thing and match fitness is another. He just looked a bit gassed. All right, let's move on to the match of the round, Sunwolves Kings. I guess, so the big free agent pickup last week was Lionel Cronje. Again this week, pretty impressive performance from him.
Yeah, no, he didn't let you down. I think this was kind of a case of, the sort of famous old Donald's Rumsfeld quote about, known unknowns and all that kind of thing. This was a bit like we kind of knew that we knew that the Sunwolves were pretty rubbish. We didn't think the Kings were particularly good, but we kind of had a feeling that they'd be okay, but we weren't sure which players would be okay. Maybe Cronje was probably the only one, and it was probably the same for the Sunwolves. We kind of have a feeling that a few of their players would be okay, and we weren't sure which ones, and it sort of panned out that way. It was like there were plenty of points around. It's just you sort of had to, other than Cronje, maybe just thrown a dart a little bit. You could have taken a chance on Mapipi, but it turns out it was Malcolm Yar that rolled up all the points. But and you're not to know. You suspect there's points there, but you just don't know who's going to get them.
Yeah, that's right. And you mentioned Big Ken Fukuoka.
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Did really well. One bit of a disappointment in terms of how Opta have named Lafai'i, but he's listed as a fly half. He looks pretty good in the midfield there, but I don't think there's not much you can do if you're playing in fly half, certainly for the Sunwolves at least. This may well be the high point for the Sunwolves players, I'm not entirely sure. But JJ Tuilagi is a good player coming on at 15. I just read a note though that he's not travelling to Africa and neither is Tanaka, so all changed there as well. What do you think of Derek Carpenter, second season syndrome?
Well, if he hadn't have dropped that pass close to the line,
that's terrible.
Yeah, I know. And he knew it too. We could have been looking at a slightly different day, I guess. There wasn't a whole lot else to take away from it because it was almost garbage time points for some of these guys too.
Yep.
Towards the end when the game was in the bag for the Kings and all of a sudden the Sunwolves started to look pretty dangerous.
Yeah, they
which,
did.
But other than that, the only other player that I picked out was somebody coming off the bench and we sort of liked him a little bit last season, and that was Chris Cloutey, I think.
That's right, Chris Cloutey, yep.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if the reason he's not starting is a quota system thing. I don't know, because he's probably a class above some of the players that are in that team, but yeah, for whatever reason, not getting a start.
No, indeed. I thought Hayden Cripps looked okay as well. It looked like he at least provided the Sunwolves with a little bit of direction in there as well. Put him around the paddock a little bit more than was it Tamura that did it last week. Any more from this game?
No.
All right, Lions Tars. Looked good game of touch rugby.
Yeah, this was the shootout.
Wasn't it? Goodness gracious. I thought the Lions looked like they were hell-bent on not having a ruck or a maul at any point in time in the game until they wanted to kick for the corner. Goodness gracious. What do you make, though, of Johan van Rensburg? How high?
Well,
How good?
As I've mentioned before, I've got 3 teams this year. I drafted him at number 2 in all 3 teams. So that's what I think of him and where I thought he should be going. So it's kind of something maybe we should have sort of talked about at the top because we haven't done a podcast since draft, the kind of draft period since the season started. In terms of strategy and how people went about things, I did get the impression that some of the more experienced players were starting to come around to a similar way of thinking than I was. Not because I said it, I'm sure.
Yep.
Just completely independently. If anything, if they heard me say it, they'd probably do the opposite. So I just think maybe that people had started to realise that going for maybe midfield, and I did in 2 teams. I went Karevi van Rensburg, and that was 1 and 2, and I'm pretty happy with that. I think that still makes a lot of sense, and it's kind of sort of panning out that way. And I think the reason why it works is obviously partly because those 2 particular players are really good, and we know they're really good. But just because of another player who is in this game who we've probably talked about, I think we mentioned him anyway in the Facebook Live session, and that's Andries Coetzee, was available so ridiculously late that that's right. One of the reasons why I was saying just don't worry about these outside backs early on. You can go and get a guy like him who I thought looked, like the guy that we knew from 2 seasons ago, and playing in this team as a fullback and with his attacking mindset, he's going to make hay, and you could have got him in the 10th round or later in drafts.
Yeah, that's right. There's a lot of value in that Lions team. I was a little bit surprised to see when it was all said and done, seeing Mapo didn't get a big score and Skosan didn't get a big score. It was Coetzee, Yankees, Ross Cronje, and as you said, Van Rensburg in there as well. I guess if the Lions keep doing this, Ross Cronje all of a sudden becomes an interesting play as well, especially if Faf is not going to be starting. But I guess, again, it's wild speculation what Ackerman's actually going to do, whether it's just lighting a fire under Faf so that, he's not untouchable. But I thought Ross Cronje actually turned out to be playing quite well as well. And if it's in this Lions team that's going well, then there's points there. Lions front row, back a little bit. Marks didn't start. Robbie Coetzee played well, but Marks came on and set up a try and scored by himself. And there was a couple of rolling mauls quite early on as well that the Fatties didn't actually score, so I think there was more points out there for the Lions front row. But this is a bit more what we're expecting, I guess.
Yeah, this is obviously more like what we expected. We didn't put them number 2 overall without a good reason. and I think this is it. So this is what the Lions are, really, isn't it? And I think at home against most teams, this is actually, they'll have off days, obviously, but we're looking at, arguably, I suppose, along with the Hurricanes, probably the most potent offense in the league.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right, exactly. And they're not going to be playing against the New Zealand teams as well. So there's going to be a few. This is potentially the best that Australia's going to throw at them. So there's going to be it's going to be some interesting points racked up here, I think, at some stage, especially with the Australian teams on the road. Mind you, the Waratahs weren't without their players, though. Andrew Callaway played well and also scored quite significantly in fantasy rugby. It was good.
Yep. No, he looked okay. Yep.
Bryce Hegarty, though, he's a bit of an enigma, isn't he? He's a very limited player. I've certainly not got a hell of a lot of time for him. I guess he's filling in a job, but he did okay. But it was more a point around Simone, because he, for 2 games now, he hasn't clicked. It just hasn't worked with him in Folau, and I just think a lot of it may come down to Hegarty, because I know there's a lot of folks that have fairly big raps on Simone. So give him a little time till Foley comes back, and I believe Foley was fairly close to being playing in this match as well. So give him a chance for that. Any more you want to talk about in the Lions Tars?
No, there isn't really. I think it's just a case, as you said, that the Tars were in this game. They contributed to it, and obviously with those players back and Phipps and Skelton out as well, they'll be better.
Yeah, I think so as well. Reece Robinson did quite well to actually score 11 points after being sent to the bin. So it helps taking the goal kicks, but he played okay as well, aside from that kind of brain melt of tip tackle. Stormers Jaguares, a fairly tight match, I guess you could say, in the end. The note that I kind of took out of the Stormers team was Jano Vermaak. Do you own him in any of your teams?
I do, yeah. Somebody I think that I mentioned during the Facebook live session, and I liked the look of him last week, and so I picked him up, and it was actually, I think it was Bryn Hall from memory that I replaced him with, and I think, as I said at the time during the Facebook live session, it was just I just thought he looked like someone that could make breaks and could get into the clear, and there's not that many halfbacks out there, I felt, that do that, and so I thought he was someone that I was prepared to gamble with, and yeah, he takes his opportunities, and he's got some speed.
Yeah, he does have some speed, doesn't he? He'll be a pretty popular ad, I would have thought, this week. It seems he's got that spot nailed down as well, and that Stormers team will go fairly well, I think. Another player that could well be the steal of the season was SP Marais. What do you make of him? Pretty good.
Yeah, he's always been good. Whenever he got a shot, maybe not so much when he was at the Kings, but yeah. So it doesn't. This once again doesn't come as a huge surprise. He's in that Andries Coetzee mold.
Yeah, I was going to say. Yeah.
He's not an international player and doesn't get big raps. You're not going to sort of see his name mentioned heavily in the press probably, but from a fantasy point of view, he's great because he likes the chances arm. Yeah,
that's right. I think he doesn't have that lightning speed, does he? But he does. He backs himself, and he just, he has a wee jink and a wee step, and he'll beat one or two. But he'll never break away from someone. But he's someone that, again, the Stormers could go quite well with their conference, and also looking at their matchups going into the playoffs way down the road. He's a good player. I think he's probably someone that if you have on your bench, certainly could put you in good stead when it comes to around 15, 16, 17. What did you make of Nicolas Sanchez?
I thought he was fine. Yeah, I mean, he might be a little bit rusty, but I actually think that, it's not just what I think, I guess it was fairly obvious that the Jags were right in this game, and up until the point, even at the point where they did have the 2 yellow cards, and I mean, God, if you want to talk about things, teams shooting themselves in the foot, then obviously their discipline is the thing that's letting them down from really being, a force in the competition. But even when they were those cards down, they sort of had the momentum late in that second half. And I don't want to say they're unlucky because, once again, it's something they brought on themselves with the discipline. But there was a forward pass by Etzebeth, which the commentators declined to mention in the build-up to it was the last pass for that try. And pretty clearly forward, I thought. But, hey, they were looking at everything else. I don't know why they decided not to look at that. But at that point, if that hadn't happened and then those players come back on, I just felt that the force was with the Jags at that point, and they possibly could have gone on to win it. But coming back from South Africa I think they'll be quietly quite pleased with maybe how things went, and I think there's some good signs for them going forward.
I agree. I thought they looked a lot more sterner, and it's exactly that, right? They're disciplined. If they have like a yellow card not at the same time, just spread it out. Just take turns, but don't do it like literally at the same time as someone else.
Yeah, I don't know if they're just big rugby league fans and like playing with 13 because they seem to do it a lot.
They scored, like Cordero scored his try, didn't he, when they were down to 13?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
As you say, they did have the momentum and it looked to be kind of turning, and the Stormers were a bit punched in the face there for a second. Going back to Sanchez, I agree. I think he looked decent, scored a bunch of points. I'm a little bit worried about how injured he gets, because he plays that way where he attacks the line, and he's smaller than I am.
And he's quite physical. He's not shy of a tackle either. No,
that's right. I think I don't know what he sees when he looks in the mirror, but he sees someone a hell of a lot bigger. Because he wants to mix it up with it. There was that classic moment where him and, I can't remember who it was. Was it Jean-Luc Duplessis?
It was,
having a little bit of handbags? That was great stuff. Yeah. A couple of titans going at it. It was awesome. I was like, I can mix it up with those two. They get knocked out, but I'll have a go. But yeah, so that's the one thing that did worry me a little bit with Sanchez, and it doesn't look like there's any natural backup to him, as well as Benilla, I guess, from last week, but he wasn't the guy that came on and kick. It was Iglesias, I think, as well. So I'm a little bit worried in that respect, but he did well. He scored while Sanchez is playing, and then again, this is away from home, and I mean, it couldn't be further away from home, for the Warriors. So seems they've learnt their lessons a little bit from last year. I'm not sure they're up into club this time, but one promising sign, certainly for Sinatla owners, when he came on at the end, didn't really have a hell of a lot to do, chased down a kick and looked fast. That was about it though, didn't get a hell of a chance, ball in hand. But good to see that at least he's back in the fold. I suspect it won't be long before he gets into that starting lineup. Anything more you wanted to say, Stormers, Jaguares?
No, just that Cordero also was another outside back that you could get relatively late. So if you decline to take one of the big named outside backs at the top of the draft, he was someone that was there, and I think he's going to be a good player this year, and I don't think you would have gone wrong with taking that approach and ending up with him in your team. Yeah,
it's true. If you got Cordero, Coetzee and SP Marais in your team, and chances are they could be your 4th, 5th, 6th outside back. That's
absolutely.
Decent.
Yeah. Like not sexy, but they'll get it done.
Hey, Cordero, come on now. How dare you?
Just I was going to say not the names, but even Santiago Cordero is actually a pretty sexy name.
That's pretty sexy, absolutely.
Yeah. I'll withdraw the statement.
He's had his lid trimmed as well. He's got one of those kind of old school racing at the sides one. Looks fast. Cheetahs Bulls. You and I mused on the Facebook Live, which Cheetahs are we going to see? They look good. This Cheetahs team looks pretty good. Is that what you see as well?
I didn't actually watch this game.
Okay.
We'll go back and have a look at it at some point. So, no, I'm pretty much leaving it in your capable hands.
No, they did. They looked really impressive. Now, look, they're a bit of an asterisk. There's 2 home games. But, playing the Lions and then playing the Bulls, I don't think those are too easy out. And they look really, really good. They decided to completely try and nullify the Bulls' big forwards they had there, the R.G. Snimes, Jason Jenkins and all those guys, Ledenberg, they tried to neutralise them by playing similar to what the Lions do, is not get a hell of a lot of contact and then throwing the ball around, and it was sticking. It didn't look like it was great conditions there. It might have been the old raining all afternoon, sunny at night thing again that we saw last week, but they look like a team that I think certainly managers are going to be targeting this week, because they've got the Sunwolves coming to Bloemfontein. So I suspect the waiver wire is going to be full of Cheetahs players. If you haven't already got up, the likes of Zalinga, Blumenkeys and Mahoje are going to be pretty hot property. And Rona Benjamin and Raymond Rule as well. And I think, from what I understand, Francois Venter might be back as well next week. So, yeah, that Sunwolves team coming over as well. And if they're resting a couple of players, I think there's some pretty encouraging signs there for folks that have taken a little bit of a roll of the dice on the Cheetahs players. I was going to ask you a question. I was going to ask you, how many points do you think, after watching the game, how many points do you think Jesse Creel scored? But if you haven't seen the game, then that's a little bit redundant. But he scored 24.2 points. And I don't remember him doing anything. He looked so quiet in that game, and I'm sure not the only one that made the point. I mean, Hellant came on with a little bit to go and scored 7 points in a very limited kind of role that he had. A bit of a throw of the dice because they were behind, and they looked like they actually could get fairly close to the Cheetahs, but it came to anything at the end. But Jesse Creel moved into 13, and I wonder if that's now a thing that Noel Marais might. I think it's Noel Marais that's the coach. I think he might be thinking of. It certainly kind of opened up a little bit more towards that kind of second half. But I couldn't believe it when Jesse Creel, because he wasn't part of that game at all. Ulingo scored well. Again, we talk about that. I don't want to talk too much about the game 15, 16, 17, and I think you and I both kind of decided that it wasn't going to be a massive relevance to in the draft. But now that we're a couple of weeks in, we know which Bulls and Stormers players you can kind of target, but Ulingo might be a good one to have on your bench if you have that fourth or fifth outside back and use them in those playoffs, because they've both got really sweet matchups in those playoffs as well, Bulls, Stormers. And the last point, again, if you haven't seen it, and when you go and listen it back, you might actually have to listen on mute, because do you remember, it was Arsenal, do you remember whenever an away goal was scored at Arsenal, just before the ball hit the back of the net, there was that woman who was close to the microphone who screamed? Yeah,
she'd scream, yeah.
Yeah, do you remember that? Yeah.
Yeah, there was a woman that used to go to Auckland rugby games that would do that as well.
Yeah, and so there was... she was constantly screaming in this game, though. It was quite unsettling. It was like she was watching some sort of horror on a movie, like on her phone, like she was watching Friday the 13th while her husband was watching the rugby or something.
Sure, yeah.
It was, at times, it was quite blood-curdling. I had to turn it down. She was coming through loud and clear. The person obviously at the Free State needs to rethink where they put their microphones. Okay, I'll let you away with not seeing this one. There's a lot of rugby through this week. We asked, again, I mentioned at the top, we asked on the Hall of Fame if there's anything you wanted to talk about. And Blair Jackson did come up with a good question that I thought was quite amusing. He said, will you confirm that the global Amazon Web Service outage was a direct result of the quantity of waiver wire requests?
Right. I'm going to choose to not answer that, because I'd imagine the lawsuit that would be coming through from disgruntled users. Amazon probably have quite a few customers, and if they could prove that it was us, that would not be good. I imagine the compensation that you'd have to pay to some of the larger corporates in the world would be might hamper our ability to provide the product that we are at the moment.
Yeah, that's true. It could. Did you actually hear how that came about and what actually happened?
No, I'm assuming, rat chewed through a wire or something.
I actually would have preferred to that, right? That sounds like it's something that, okay, well, what are you going to do about that? Obviously, clearly you need to be secure servers, etc., etc. But no, it was human error. So an engineer was supposed to take a small subset of servers offline to debug it.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, his command line took down a large group of servers. and they apologised because it took a little bit longer than expected to unscrew his error. But I just could not believe that. It's still 2017, and it comes down to someone typing something in and brings down Instagram and everything else. It's amazing.
Yeah. So with their drones carrying parcels just crashing into buildings and random
just
stuff.
dropping out of the sky. Bevan Smith asked a good question though, and it's kind of putting you on the spot. We've got 2 game weeks in now. Who is this year's Milner Scudder or Yakko Creel, if there is one? And I'll give you a bit of time to think about that. I don't think necessarily that there is, because when you kind of look at that qualification, you need to look at A, they're in a good team that'll go well this season, and B, whether they're a superstar and are liable to be, come out of nowhere. And players like Chance Penny falls foul of the first one. Players like Jean-Luc Dupree falls foul of the first one as well. So I think both of those have limited upside because they don't play on this championship caliber team. But if I had to put my colours to the mask, apart from the really obvious ones, I'd say Jean-Luc Dupree looks the goods.
Okay. I mean, because these guys are relatively known quantities, which I think is something that Milner Scudder wasn't coming into the season.
Yep.
The way I would look at it, I guess, is that, well, I can't, it's true for Milner Scudder, it might not be true for Yakko Creel, but so that maybe Laumape, has the potential to be right up there.
Yep.
Jordie Barrett, obviously, having not played Super Rugby before, there is the potential there that he could be, something special.
Yep.
Outside of that, nobody really leaps to mind so far.
Yeah. No, I agree. I thought it was it's not that there isn't good performing players that we didn't, that are fairly lowly ranked, like, as you said, like Laumape. It's just that if you frame it with Yakko Creel and Milner Scudder, you're talking about, 2 of the top 5-6 players in Super Rugby. These are superstars. All right, is there anything more from the weekend that you wanted to go over that we haven't chatted about yet?
No, nothing that we haven't chatted about, but I do think if we're at the stage where a couple of weeks in and you are thinking about trades, then you mentioned Folau, and obviously now I think it's probably going to be too rich for most people, but I do think that somebody like Mapu is a classic example of someone who is a good player, was highly ranked, that we do like and we do rate, has not had a good start, and I think because he's not a Folau level name, he's someone that could spook people into wanting to trade away.
Yep, no, great shout. I was no, we're not talking about high tariff here, but I was looking at someone like Sean McMahon. If you have loose forwards that have gone okay, someone like maybe Brad Shields who scored 25 points, you probably could get a Sean McMahon trade if someone's not necessarily understanding, or they're playing for the first time and they don't understand the value that Sean McMahon can have. I also thought it was a bit harsh on the Rebels that they're without Novalu, without Sean McMahon. Those are 2 pretty pivotal games, and Koroibete, starting for the first time as well. Actually, what did you make of Koroibete? Just quietly, because there's a lot of buzz with him.
No, well, as I said earlier, that was one of the games I didn't see. Thanks for paying attention.
Sorry. All right, yeah, no, don't pay attention. Yeah, it just, yeah, okay, the bottom line is you can't really, as you alluded to, you can't take much out of this anyway. He's a winger on a team that was getting pushed back the whole time, so didn't get a hell of a lot of opportunities. But all right, cool. Let's call it a night here. A quick reminder of how you can contact us. Actually, I've got one more thing to do. I said at the top of the hour that we would talk about our Refer a Friend winner, because we only talked about it on Facebook Live. So
yeah, I did wonder about that.
Yep, there we go. Congratulations, Robert Waddington. Well done, sir. You get to pick your choice of 2017 Super Rugby jersey, so that's some good job. Well done, sir. We'll be in touch in the next couple of days. If you know Robert, pat him on the back. A quick reminder how to contact us. You can follow us on Twitter at Fantasy Rug Draft. That's Fantasy REG Draft. Or if you have any questions, send us a mail at support@fantasyrugbydraft.com. Facebook Hall of Fame group is a great place where folks are tossing a few ideas around start. Who should I start this week? Trying to dig around for some injuries. So if you're looking for a bit of more information and we haven't got back to you via Twitter or Facebook, then that's a good starting point as well. Thanks for listening. I'm Bruce Wilkinson. He's Nathan Mossman.
This is not a joke.
Talk to you, Repeato.
What a bust here by Christian Cullen. Plenty of support, and what a dummy!